Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Today I want to dive deep into a topic that most of us at some point have wrestled with in our own lives: self-sabotage. Why do we keep standing in our own way? Why do we repeatedly make decisions that seem to work against our best interests? The answer lies in the mysterious, often hidden parts of our psyche, where unseen forces govern much of our behavior. Let's begin by discussing the unconscious mind. Imagine your mind as a vast ocean. On the surface, you have your conscious thoughts, the things you're aware of, the decisions you make with purpose. But beneath the surface, the unconscious mind is like the deep waters, holding everything from repressed emotions to unresolved conflicts. The unconscious influences our actions in ways we might not realize. Often we sabotage ourselves because these hidden elements, which we've buried deep down, surface at the most inconvenient times. We might feel a sudden wave of fear, panic, or doubt, even when there's no obvious reason for it. But it's not just randomness. It's the unconscious pulling strings from beneath, causing us to sabotage the opportunities that lie ahead of us. Next, we turn to the shadow, that mysterious part of us that we often ignore, reject, or try to hide. Each of us has a shadow side, traits, desires, and emotions we deem undesirable or even shameful. When we don't confront or integrate these parts of ourselves, they work against us, often appearing in our thoughts, actions, and even in our dreams. When we fail to acknowledge the shadow, it subtly controls our behavior. For example, you may say you want success, but deep down, there's a part of you that fears it. Perhaps fearing that success will isolate you, or that you're not worthy of it. Instead of owning that fear, we let it take the wheel, and before we know it, we sabotage our own progress. The key to ending this cycle lies not in denying the shadow, but in accepting it, integrating these darker parts of ourselves so that they no longer control us from the background. Finally, let's talk about the inner conflict that many of us face on a daily basis. We are torn between what we consciously want and what our unconscious mind craves. Our conscious desires might be clear. We want to be successful, we want healthy relationships, we want to grow. But our unconscious mind, shaped by past experiences, fears, and traumas, might push us towards self-doubt, resistance, or procrastination. This internal tug-of-war can leave us paralyzed, unable to move forward, even though we know what is best for us. We feel as if we are in a constant battle with ourselves, unable to break free from the cycle of self-sabotage. The only way to resolve this conflict is to understand the deeper forces at play and seek harmony between our conscious desires and unconscious needs. When we bring awareness to the inner struggle, we begin to bridge the gap between our intentions and action. In conclusion, the reason we continue to sabotage ourselves isn't because we are weak, incapable, or flawed. It's because we are not fully aware of the hidden parts of ourselves. We are not in touch with the unconscious forces, the shadow, and the inner conflicts that drive our behavior. By acknowledging and integrating these parts of ourselves, we can break free from the patterns of self-sabotage and step into a life that aligns with our true potential. The journey to self-realization requires us to confront the darkness, embrace our complexity, and seek a balance between the conscious and unconscious aspects of the mind. So, the next time you find yourself standing in your own way, take a moment to pause. Ask yourself, what part of me is being triggered? What unresolved feelings, what hidden fear, or what aspect of my shadow is coming to the surface? By doing this, you might just discover that you are the key to unlocking the life you've always wanted. The unconscious mind is one of the most powerful and mysterious elements of human psychology. It is a vast, hidden expanse within our consciousness, much like the deep ocean beneath the visible surface of the water. What we see and experience on the surface, the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors we consciously recognize, is only a tiny fraction of what is happening within us. The unconscious mind, in contrast, is like an unseen undercurrent that moves silently beneath, influencing everything we do, often without us even realizing it. This is where the root of self-sabotage frequently lies, as we find ourselves engaging in actions that contradict our conscious intentions, desires, and goals. The reasons for this are many, but it ultimately boils down to the fact that our unconscious mind holds a wealth of unresolved emotions, past experiences, and deeply ingrained patterns that we are often unaware of, yet they exert a tremendous influence over our actions. To begin understanding why we sabotage ourselves, we must first consider what the unconscious mind actually encompasses. It is not a single, isolated entity, but a vast network of memories, experiences, thoughts, fears, and desires that we have suppressed or forgotten. These are the things that shape our behaviors and decisions, but because we are not directly aware of them, they can manifest in strange or self-destructive ways. A person may find themselves procrastinating on an important project or sabotaging a relationship, even when they consciously desire success or fulfillment. This dissonance between what we consciously want and how we behave is often the result of the unconscious mind acting as a hidden force, subtly guiding us away from our goals, often in ways we don't fully understand. This dynamic can be particularly perplexing. If you consciously desire success, why is it that you find yourself procrastinating, avoiding hard work, or pushing away opportunities that would lead to your success? The answer lies in the unconscious mind, which can be shaped by a variety of forces. First and foremost, the unconscious mind is a repository of everything we have experienced, especially in our formative years. Childhood experiences, family dynamics, social conditioning, and personal traumas can all leave imprints on our unconscious mind. These imprints can shape our beliefs, values, and attitudes in ways that we may not even remember or recognize, but they continue to exert influence over us long after the events that created them. For instance, consider a person who was raised in an environment where they were constantly told they were not good enough, that they would never succeed, or that their dreams were unrealistic. These early experiences are not easily forgotten, and they become embedded in the unconscious mind. Over time, they can form the foundation of a person's self-doubt and feelings of inadequacy. Even though a person may consciously desire to achieve great things, their unconscious mind, filled with these old negative beliefs, may quietly nudge them away from the success they desire. They may find themselves procrastinating or engaging in behaviors that prevent them from fully pursuing their dreams, because deep down they fear failure or believe they are not worthy of success. The unconscious mind is also heavily influenced by emotional experiences. Emotions such as fear, shame, anger, and guilt can leave deep imprints in our unconscious. These emotions often arise from experiences that we have not fully processed or understood, leaving them unresolved within us. When these emotions are not dealt with or acknowledged, they continue to affect our behavior in subtle ways. For example, a person who experienced emotional abandonment as a child might carry feelings of unworthiness or fear of rejection deep within their unconscious mind. As an adult, this person may consciously desire to form deep and meaningful relationships, but when an opportunity arises, they may unconsciously sabotage it by withdrawing, pushing the other person away, or behaving in ways that create distance. These behaviors stem not from a lack of desire for connection, but from unconscious fears that they are not worthy of love, or that they will inevitably be abandoned again. Another way the unconscious mind sabotages us is through defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological strategies that protect us from uncomfortable emotions or situations. These mechanisms are natural and serve a protective function, but they can also lead us to self-sabotage. For example, denial is a defense mechanism where a person refuses to acknowledge or accept a painful reality. A person might be aware that their job is making them unhappy or unhealthy, but they continue to stay in it because their unconscious mind refuses to confront the discomfort of change. The fear of the unknown or the discomfort of facing reality can keep a person stuck in a situation that is harmful to them, even if they consciously know they should leave. Similarly, projection is another defense mechanism where individuals attribute their own unacceptable feelings or behaviors to others. If a person has deep-seated feelings of anger or resentment, they may project these feelings onto others, assuming that others are angry or resentful towards them, even when this is not the case. This projection can create tension in relationships and lead to conflict, making it difficult for the individual to form healthy, productive connections with others. In this way, the unconscious mind uses defense mechanisms to shield us from emotional pain. But these same mechanisms can prevent us from fully engaging with the world in a way that fosters growth and success. Additionally, the unconscious mind often leads us to repeat patterns of behavior that we have learned in the past. This is known as repetition compulsion, where we unconsciously reenact past experiences, even if they were negative or harmful. If a person experienced emotional neglect in childhood, they may unconsciously seek out relationships in adulthood where they are neglected or mistreated, because that is the pattern they learned to expect. These patterns are deeply ingrained in the unconscious mind and can perpetuate cycles of self-sabotage. Despite a conscious desire to break free from these patterns, the unconscious mind often pulls us back into old habits because they feel familiar, even if they are not beneficial. The unconscious mind's influence is not entirely negative, however. It is also a source of creativity, intuition, and wisdom. Our unconscious mind holds a vast storehouse of knowledge, experiences, and insights that we are not always consciously aware of. Many of the greatest breakthroughs in science, art, and innovation come from tapping into this hidden reservoir of unconscious knowledge. However, for us to access these resources, we must first become more aware of the unconscious forces at play within us. This requires a process of self-reflection and self-awareness, where we begin to explore the deeper layers of our psyche and uncover the unconscious patterns and beliefs that are influencing our behavior. The key to overcoming self-sabotage lies in this process of self-awareness. By becoming aware of the unconscious forces that are guiding our actions, we can begin to address the underlying causes of our self-destructive behaviors. This requires a willingness to confront the parts of ourselves that we may not want to face, the fears, the insecurities, the wounds from the past. It also requires a commitment to healing and growth, as we work to reprogram our unconscious mind and replace old, limiting beliefs with new, empowering ones. The concept of the shadow is one of the most profound and transformative ideas in the field of psychology. It refers to the unconscious aspects of ourselves that we repress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge because they do not fit with the idealized version of who we think we should be. The shadow consists of the traits, desires, fears, and emotions that we find uncomfortable, unacceptable, or shameful. These aspects of our psyche often lie hidden in the unconscious, and our failure to confront and integrate them can result in self-sabotage, distorted self-image, and psychological tension. The shadow is not simply a repository of negative traits. It also holds the qualities and strengths we may have neglected or rejected. And it can be a source of untapped potential. However, without conscious awareness, the shadow exerts a powerful influence over our behavior, often leading us to engage in self-destructive patterns and resist personal growth. When we are born, we do not have a developed sense of self or a defined identity. As we grow, society, our families, and our experiences begin to shape who we are and what we believe to be acceptable or unacceptable. We learn what is considered good and bad, what is right and wrong, based on cultural, familial, and societal norms. From a young age, we begin to receive feedback from those around us about how we should behave, what we should feel, and how we should present ourselves to the world. The parts of us that do not align with these expectations are often rejected and suppressed. For instance, a child who is naturally energetic and expressive might be told to calm down or stop acting out. As a result, that child may begin to suppress their natural exuberance in favor of fitting in with social expectations. Over time, the aspects of themselves that are judged as unacceptable are repressed and pushed into the unconscious mind, forming what is known as the shadow. The shadow is not a simple collection of negative traits. It encompasses all of the traits, qualities, and behaviors that we do not identify with or choose to disown. These qualities can be both positive and negative. For example, someone who was taught that showing vulnerability is a weakness may repress their emotional side, creating a shadow that consists of their unacknowledged feelings. On the other hand, a person who has been taught that ambition is virtuous might suppress their more humble, content, or introspective qualities. The shadow includes both the traits we consider bad, such as anger, jealousy, greed, or selfishness, and the traits we view as weak or undesirable, such as passivity. This is important to understand because we often think of the shadow in terms of darkness, but it also contains the very things that might lead to personal growth, creativity, and wisdom if we were to fully integrate them into our conscious selves. The process of repressing or denying parts of ourselves can be seen as an adaptive survival mechanism. In many ways, we create the shadow to protect ourselves from the pain, judgment, or rejection that might come from expressing parts of ourselves that do not fit societal norms or familial expectations. However, this adaptive mechanism becomes problematic when it leads to the repression of important aspects of who we are. These hidden aspects of the self do not simply disappear, they continue to exert influence over our lives in subtle and often destructive ways. The more we suppress these parts, the more they build up in the unconscious mind, and the more they tend to emerge in unexpected or harmful ways. One of the ways the shadow expresses itself is through projection. Projection occurs when we unconsciously attribute our own repressed feelings, qualities, or behaviors onto others. This is a defense mechanism that helps us avoid facing our own uncomfortable feelings by blaming others for them. For example, a person who is struggling with anger may project their own anger onto someone else, accusing them of being irritable or difficult, even though the anger they are feeling is their own. Similarly, someone who is deeply insecure may project their own feelings of inadequacy onto others, believing that others are judging them or thinking less of them, when in fact it is their own self-doubt that is at play. Projection keeps us from taking responsibility for our feelings and behaviors, and it creates conflict and misunderstanding in our relationships. Projection is just one example of how the shadow can influence our lives. Another common way the shadow manifests is through self-sabotage. When we refuse to acknowledge certain parts of ourselves, these aspects often drive our behavior in unconscious and self-destructive ways. For instance, someone who is deeply afraid of failure may unconsciously undermine their own efforts by procrastinating, avoiding challenges, or engaging in self-defeating behaviors. Despite consciously wanting success, their unconscious fear of failure, which is rooted in their shadow, sabotages their progress. In this case, the person is unaware of the shadow aspect, the fear of failure, that is influencing their behavior. Instead, they might blame external factors like a lack of resources or bad luck for their inability to succeed. However, the real issue lies within, in the unconscious beliefs and fears that drive their actions. Another example of self-sabotage tied to the shadow can be found in relationships. A person who has unresolved issues related to abandonment or rejection in their past may unconsciously choose partners who are emotionally unavailable or distant, reenacting the patterns of neglect they experienced as a child. They may consciously desire a loving, secure relationship, but their unconscious shadow is at play, guiding them toward partners who will confirm their deepest fears of being unworthy of love. This unconscious pattern leads to repeated disappointment and frustration as the person unconsciously sabotages their chances for a healthy, fulfilling relationship. The shadow can also create internal conflict, leading us to feel torn between two opposing desires or goals. For example, a person may consciously want to pursue a new career or start a business, but their unconscious shadow is filled with fear and self-doubt, leading them to procrastinate or avoid taking action. The person may rationalize their behavior by telling themselves that the timing isn't right or that they aren't ready, but the real cause of the procrastination is the unconscious conflict between their desire for success and the fear of failure or rejection that lies in their shadow. The more they avoid confronting the shadow, the more the internal conflict intensifies, making it increasingly difficult to move forward. To begin the process of integrating the shadow and overcoming its negative influence, it is essential to bring awareness to these hidden aspects of the self. This requires a willingness to confront the parts of ourselves that we have previously rejected or ignored. It means accepting that we are not perfect, and that we have both light and dark aspects within us. Integration does not mean eradicating the shadow or rejecting these parts of ourselves, but rather acknowledging them, understanding them, and finding healthy ways to express them. A key part of shadow integration is self-reflection. By examining our behaviors, emotions, and reactions, we can begin to identify patterns that may be linked to our shadow. This can be done through journaling, meditation, therapy, or simply by paying attention to our thoughts and feelings. It is important to approach this process with compassion and curiosity, rather than judgment or self-criticism. The shadow contains aspects of ourselves that we have not yet accepted, and it is through self-compassion that we can begin to soften our resistance to these parts, and allow them to emerge into the light. Another important step in integrating the shadow is owning our projections. When we find ourselves reacting strongly to others, it is often a sign that we are projecting something from our shadow onto them. By becoming aware of our projections, we can begin to take responsibility for our feelings and behaviors rather than blaming others. This requires us to reflect on what we are truly feeling and why, rather than immediately attributing our emotions to external circumstances. By taking responsibility for our projections, we can break the cycle of blaming others and begin to reclaim the parts of ourselves that we have disowned. Shadow integration is not an easy or quick process. It requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves. However, the rewards of this process are immense. When we integrate our shadow, we become more whole, more authentic, and more capable of living a fulfilling and meaningful life. We stop sabotaging ourselves, and we begin to act in alignment with our true desires and values. The shadow is not something to fear or avoid. It is a vital part of who we are, and by embracing it, we unlock our full potential. The internal conflict between our conscious desires and unconscious impulses is one of the most complex and perplexing aspects of human behavior. It is a dynamic that shapes much of our decision-making, our emotional lives, and ultimately our success or failure. At the core of this conflict lies the tension between what we consciously want, what we believe is best for us, and the deeper, often hidden desires and fears that reside in our unconscious mind. These unconscious forces are shaped by past experiences, repressed emotions, and ingrained beliefs, and they frequently operate beneath the surface, subtly guiding our actions in ways that contradict our conscious intentions. The result is an internal struggle, a battle between our rational minds, which seek to move us toward our goals, and the more primal, unconscious forces that may pull us in an entirely different direction. At its core, this internal conflict arises from a lack of alignment between our conscious will and unconscious desires. The conscious mind is the part of us that is aware of our thoughts, intentions, and goals. It is the rational, logical part of us that makes plans, sets goals, and takes action in the pursuit of those goals. However, the conscious mind does not operate in isolation. It is deeply influenced by the unconscious, which holds the vast majority of our memories, emotions, and learned patterns of behavior. These unconscious forces often operate outside of our awareness, shaping our desires, fears, and beliefs in ways that we may not fully understand. When our conscious desires conflict with these deeper, unconscious influences, we find ourselves caught in an internal struggle that can prevent us from moving forward in a meaningful way. One of the most significant sources of this conflict is the unconscious mind's reservoir of unresolved emotional experiences. Our unconscious is like a storage vault for all of the emotional experiences that we have not fully processed or integrated into our conscious awareness. These might be past traumas, repressed feelings, or unresolved conflicts. For example, a person who experienced emotional neglect as a child may have developed a deep-seated fear of rejection or abandonment. These unresolved feelings may lie dormant in the unconscious, but they will continue to shape the person's behavior in subtle ways. Despite their conscious desire for healthy relationships, this person may find themselves sabotaging potential connections, withdrawing from intimacy, or pushing others away out of fear that they will be abandoned once again. This internal conflict arises because the unconscious fear of rejection is in direct opposition to the person's conscious desire for connection. The more these unconscious fears go unaddressed, the more they control the individual's behavior, creating a cycle of self-sabotage and emotional pain. Similarly, the unconscious mind holds beliefs and values that we may not fully recognize, but that still shape our actions. Many of these beliefs are formed early in life, often as a result of social conditioning or familial expectations. For example, a child raised in an environment where success was equated with worthiness may grow up with a deep belief that they are only valuable if they achieve great things. As an adult, this person may consciously desire a simple, peaceful life, free from the pressures of achievement and success. However, their unconscious belief in the need for external validation may drive them to constantly seek approval from others, work excessively, or feel unfulfilled when they do not meet their own high standards. The internal conflict here arises because their conscious desire for peace and contentment is at odds with their unconscious need for success and recognition. This type of internal conflict can lead to burnout, stress, and dissatisfaction as the person struggles to reconcile these opposing forces within themselves. Another powerful source of internal conflict is the fear of failure, which is deeply rooted in the unconscious mind. Fear of failure is often an unconscious reaction to past experiences of disappointment or rejection. For example, a person who failed at a significant endeavor earlier in life may have internalized that experience as a personal flaw, leading to feelings of shame and self-doubt. These unconscious fears may not be readily accessible to the conscious mind, but they still play a significant role in shaping behavior. A person who consciously desires to succeed in their career or personal life may find themselves procrastinating, avoiding new challenges, or undermining their own efforts out of fear that they will fail again. This fear of failure can be paralyzing, preventing the person from taking the necessary steps to achieve their goals. The internal conflict here arises because the conscious mind wants success, but the unconscious mind is gripped by fear, leading to inaction or self-sabotage. The dynamics of this internal conflict are often reinforced by defense mechanisms, which are unconscious strategies that the mind uses to protect itself from uncomfortable emotions or experiences. These defense mechanisms can manifest in a variety of ways, from denial to repression to rationalization. For example, a person who has a deep fear of failure may use rationalization to justify their inaction. They might tell themselves that the timing is not right, or that they are simply too busy with other things, when in reality their fear of failure is preventing them from taking action. Similarly, a person who is struggling with feelings of inadequacy might use projection, attributing their own feelings of insecurity onto others. They might believe that others are judging them or thinking less of them, when in fact, it is their own unconscious fears of rejection and failure that are driving their behavior. These defense mechanisms allow the individual to avoid confronting the painful emotions and beliefs that are at the root of their internal conflict, but they also prevent the individual from moving forward and resolving the conflict. The inner conflict between the conscious and unconscious mind also plays out in the realm of self-image. Our self-image is the mental picture we have of ourselves, which is shaped by both conscious and unconscious beliefs. The conscious mind may have a positive view of itself, believing that it is capable, successful, and deserving of happiness. However, the unconscious mind may hold deeply ingrained beliefs of unworthiness or inadequacy, often rooted in early experiences of rejection, criticism, or failure. When these unconscious beliefs come into conflict with the conscious self-image, the person may struggle with feelings of insecurity, self-doubt, or imposter syndrome. Despite external evidence of success or accomplishment, the individual may feel like a fraud or worry that others will eventually discover their perceived flaw. This internal conflict between the conscious self-image and the unconscious beliefs about self-worth can lead to feelings of anxiety, self-sabotage, and a constant need for external validation. The internal conflict between conscious desires and unconscious impulses can also manifest in relationships. Many people consciously desire deep, meaningful connections with others, yet they find themselves repeatedly entering relationships that are unfulfilling or dysfunctional. This often occurs when the unconscious mind is influenced by unresolved emotional wounds or fears from the past. For example, a person who experienced emotional abandonment as a child may unconsciously seek out partners who are emotionally unavailable, reenacting the pain of neglect. They may consciously desire a loving, secure relationship, but their unconscious mind is drawn to the familiar pattern of rejection and emotional distance. This creates a deep internal conflict, as the person is torn between their conscious desire for connection and their unconscious fears of intimacy and abandonment. The more the unconscious fear goes unaddressed, the more it influences the person's choices, leading to repeated patterns of emotional pain and disappointment. Resolving this internal conflict requires bringing awareness to the unconscious forces at play. The first step in resolving this inner struggle is to become aware of the unconscious beliefs, fears, and desires that are influencing our behavior. This can be achieved through self-reflection, mindfulness, and emotional awareness. Journaling, meditation, and therapy are powerful tools for uncovering the unconscious patterns that drive our actions. Once these unconscious influences are brought into conscious awareness, we can begin the process of integrating them into our decision-making and behavior. This involves accepting the deeper, often uncomfortable aspects of ourselves and learning to work with them in a way that supports our conscious goals. The process of resolving internal conflict also involves developing greater self-compassion and self-acceptance. Rather than judging ourselves for the unconscious fears and desires that arise, it is important to approach them with curiosity and understanding. These unconscious forces are often the result of past experiences, and they are not inherently bad or wrong. They are simply parts of ourselves that we have yet to fully understand or integrate. By approaching these aspects with compassion, we can begin to heal the wounds that have created the internal conflict and move toward greater alignment between our conscious desires and unconscious impulses. Ultimately, resolving the inner conflict between conscious will and unconscious desire is a lifelong process. It requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to face the parts of ourselves that we may not fully understand. However, the rewards of this process are immense. When we are able to bring the unconscious mind into alignment with our conscious desires, we gain greater clarity, confidence, and purpose. We become more whole and authentic, and we are able to move forward in a way that is in harmony with our true selves. The internal conflict no longer holds us back, and we are free to pursue our goals and live a life that is aligned with our deepest values and desires. In conclusion, the struggle of self-sabotage is not a simple matter of weakness or lack of willpower. Rather, it is the result of the complex interplay between the conscious and unconscious mind. Our unconscious is filled with unresolved emotions, repressed memories, and deeply ingrained beliefs that, while often hidden from our awareness, significantly influence our behavior. When there is a disconnect between our conscious desires and the unconscious patterns that drive us, we find ourselves caught in cycles of procrastination, self-doubt, and emotional turmoil. This internal conflict can prevent us from achieving our goals and realizing our full potential. The shadow, the hidden aspects of ourselves that we reject or deny, plays a central role in this dynamic. It holds both the parts of us that we deem negative and those that we have ignored or suppressed, including our strengths, vulnerabilities, and desires. By failing to confront and integrate our shadow, we inadvertently allow it to shape our behavior in ways that can be destructive and self-sabotaging. Only through self-awareness, self-acceptance, and a willingness to embrace the parts of ourselves that we have previously rejected, can we begin to dissolve this internal conflict and move toward a more aligned and fulfilling life. Ultimately, the journey toward overcoming self-sabotage is not about fighting against these unconscious forces, but about understanding and integrating them. When we take the time to explore our unconscious mind, uncover the beliefs and fears that are driving us, and confront the unresolved emotions that have been buried for so long, we can begin to free ourselves from the patterns of self-sabotage. By doing so, we unlock the potential for growth, creativity, and success that lies within each of us. Through this process of integration, we come to realize that the greatest obstacles we face are not external, but internal, and that the key to overcoming them lies within our own ability to understand, accept, and transform the parts of ourselves that have long been hidden in the depths of our unconscious. As we continue on this journey, we must remember that the process of self-discovery and self-empowerment is ongoing. It requires patience, vulnerability, and compassion for ourselves. But when we confront the internal forces that have kept us stuck in patterns of self-sabotage, we unlock the freedom to live in harmony with our true desires, to step into our fullest potential, and to create the life we truly deserve. The power to overcome self-sabotage and unlock the life we seek lies within us all. It is simply a matter of turning inward, understanding ourselves, and taking conscious action to align our inner world with the life we desire to create.